All right, tonight's bedtime story is some stuff from Ability Development from Age 0, which you can buy and read on your Kindle app. It is well worth it. It is translated from the original Japanese and it's an old translation, so sometimes it can be a little bit esoteric. It's nearly like reading a series of poems and then you've got to stop and think about how to apply those pieces of poetry to your life. And this book is like my wake-up call, because whenever I'm thinking, why can't my child do, I go, that's actually my responsibility. So it's a big read if you're ready to say, do you know what? This is actually my responsibility, which isn't always easy. And it's an ongoing journey and it requires a lot of inward looking. Suzuki's book places emphasis on the responsibility of the adult to improve everything under their control and create an environment worthy of the noble spirit with which every child is born. So Suzuki's asking us to take responsibility for developing every child's potential. He doesn't suggest that every child has the same potential, or that every child will grow up to reach the same level of ability, but he suggests that every child has an inborn ability that we can't discern by looking at them at birth. Something I really like, and this is something I've encountered a lot personally in my own childhood and now as a parent, is this idea. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong page. All Japanese children speak Japanese. However, for Suzuki, this was an enlightening thought. 5- and 6-year-old children speak Japanese easily. They speak the difficult dialects of their respective areas without any problem. They have the talent to catch the delicate nuances of the Osaka dialect and the ability to master the nasal pronunciation of Aomori and Akita dialects. I was astounded. This ability is no small accomplishment. The children show such a high level of educational possibilities. Already, at 5 and 6 years old, children have developed an internalized language, and I was deeply moved by this discovery, which led to my understanding of the education involved in learning the mother tongue. Now, this is kind of interesting because often people say of 5 and 6-year-olds, oh, they're so talented. No, they're not. They weren't born that way. They did spring into this world a fully formed 6-year-old able to do these things. They are that way as the result of their environment. And whatever that environment contains is going to nurture or quash different abilities. In case you think that there's no cure for tone deafness and you yourself or you think that your child is not responsive to pitch, let me reassure you that even tone deaf children can be developed. Suzuki also taught a 6-year-old tone deaf child who was successfully able to develop talent. The tone deaf child was not born that way. When he was a baby, his mother or grandmother sang out of tune lullabies to him, and as he heard them, he became tone deaf. To cure the child's tone deafness, I used the following method. It is very difficult to correct tone deafness which has been internalized. Therefore, instead of correcting the old tone deaf scale, we'll say, I made a new scale for which I repeated the training over and over again. When the new scale had been experienced more times than the old scale gradually wore thin and was erased. That child nurtured his talent so well as to have a recital in Canada. I would like parents to use their perceptive abilities to think about the seed of talent which children have that can be developed to a surprisingly high level. And we understand this because we grow things. We plant tomato seeds and we don't expect to plant them in sand and walk away and come back to a thriving crop. If we research what type of environment will best benefit the tomato, what complementary plants to surround it with, whether it likes light or shade or lots of water or little water, we try to provide the tomato with the optimum conditions. And that's also different too. For some people, optimal might be about having the biggest plant, or the plant that produces the most fruit, or the plant that produces the sweetest tomatoes, or the plant that produces the biggest tomatoes. Everyone's got different priorities, which is fine. But what we're talking about is the ability to recognize that environment nurtures growth. So what type of environment you choose to create directly influences the growth and development of the seed that you've planted in that environment. I don't want that one. Ah. It all depends on how children are raised. How about the habit of practicing the violin? Practice, Mother says enthusiastically every day. Regardless of how much interest Mother has, nothing will happen if the child does not want to practice. Practice, even if repeated, is only an everyday unpleasant experience to the child. The more "it's practice time" is said, the more the child wants to run away and play. Please remember that ability cannot be developed without a certain amount of training. Taking a baby to Alaska for 1 month is not enough, but after 2 or 3 years, the ability to adapt to the cold will become internalized. In order to carry out the repetition, the circumstances surrounding the repetition must be happy and without fuss. In talent education, we have the mother play the recording many times of the piece to be practiced later. There was one mother who taped the piece many times and left the tape going by itself. If the tape is playing in one part of the house, she can do other things or relax, and the child will come to think nothing of listening to the piece. During repeated listening, the child will internalize the piece. Then, when the child is taken to his first violin lesson, he can hear other children playing that piece. If a child is 3 years old, their mother is taught good violin posture and how to play on the small violin. The child amuses themselves until the mother learns to play a short piece. Notice that we're not actually starting with the child. After a month or 2, the child is probably thinking something like this: "Other children are playing the violin, I want to play too." That's what I watched happen. At this point, the child is motivated to play the violin and begins to take the violin that mother has been playing. If this happens, the child is caught. He now has the incentive to begin serious practice, and the preparatory situation has been completed. "Do you want to play the violin?" asks mother. "Yes," is always the answer. "Will you work hard?" "Yes." "Shall we ask teacher to teach you?" "Yes." In this way, practice begins with a spontaneous plea from the child. Commands like "do your homework," "study," when the child has no incentive, is the worst education method. In many cases, I wonder if this poor kind of practice is going on. Do your practicing. There are those who think that this constant nagging is education. This method can be the "how not to develop ability" method. Children will do what they dislike if they are scolded. However, if they do not have the desire to do it, it will not develop into an ability. When a child has the desire, the ability will become internalized. His life force will reach out and the ability becomes internalized. The same can be said about plant cultivation. True cultivators know that a seed needs plenty of fertilizer, water, and sunshine. If you hold a seed in your hand and yell, "Sprout! Sprout!" you are being merciless to the seed. It will not sprout unless the conditions are right. Adults typically behave in this way. I often say to mothers how obedient children are. Adults do such cruel things in comparison. In spite of complaints, children practice the violin every day and gradually become able to play. What would happen if they were adults? If you were scolded in the same fashion, you would turn around and scold back, saying, "I will never touch the violin again." Children practice in spite of being scolded. Why don't you make happiness part of their incentive? If the attitude of the parent changes, then the attitude of the child will also change. Then they can reach out and grow more and more. I further request the following from parents. Suzuki, not me. I mean, I'm happy to back him up. The child has become able to play a piece very well. After dinner on Saturday, make father the audience, and mother and child should get up on stage and play the piece for father. Even an orange crate will do for the stage. When this is planned, the child practices very hard to play for their concert. The Saturday night concert begins. The child bows and plays a piece. "Very good, well done!" Praise the child, even if the performance is poor. And then father says, "Would you play for me again next week?" The child will then happily practice hard for another week. This is one way to put incentive and joy into practice. In this way, the household also becomes joyful. Only 3 minutes are necessary, so much will be accomplished. It is not difficult. Beforehand, Mum says to Dad, Please say that you want to hear him again next week, and please applaud. In this way, even a small performance will allow the child to enjoy their practice. The following week, the piece is more polished when the child opens their concert. In this way, as the weeks go by, and if other pieces the child has played are added, they will become able to play all of their pieces well. Once a month or once a week, the children can have a group lesson. Children enjoy playing together very much. It is fun to play together in ensemble. Scolding is absent and they all play together without hesitation. Since more advanced students will also be playing, their advanced style will be absorbed by the newer children, not just the sound but also the attitude. Through their ability to adapt to the environment, they can pick up something better than themselves with sensitivity and joy. So that's the first chapter, or excerpts of the first chapter of ability development from age 0. And it goes on in a similar way, talking about exactly how we want to inculcate ability and how it's important that we are modeling rather than demanding and leading rather than prodding. I've experienced for myself now with several sets of siblings, the younger child watching the lesson and going, oh, they get all that attention. They got stickers. Mum's really happy now. I want to do that. And I'm sure everyone's heard Audrey's famous anecdote of, when I was 1, Mum gave me a cardboard violin and I threw it across the room. She really did. Like, it hit the wall. And that's why we gave her a real one, hoping that she would discriminate, which she thankfully did. But there is so much desire that children catch from seeing their peers play. We've talked briefly this term about magical adults. I think a lot of young children have the idea that adults are inherently a little bit magical because they can do so much more than kids can. And so when they see someone else they recognise as a child still who can't drive or still goes to school or is only a head taller than them, they think, oh, I could probably do that too. And when they get to teach each other, the older child invariably masters the piece and has a new understanding of it, which is wonderful. The younger child invariably is kind of amazed because they get to come back and show the official teacher what they've learnt all by themselves. We know they didn't really learn it by themselves, but that's not important. And in this way, there's this circle developed where the younger child wants to impress the older child and the older child wants to be really good so that they impress the younger child. And we have this amazing relationship that we're allowed to foster. Suzuki didn't teach one-to-one. He taught small groups where 6 or 7 children would come to the studio at the same time, and he would work with them as they became interested or ready, and he would send them away from the focal point of the lesson and back to their parent as they lost focus or as they achieved the point of the lesson. He often said 1 point per lesson, so he would only ask for one specific skill to be trained or improved. But he also didn't teach pieces in lessons. Children came and they played the piece they'd been working on at home and he worked with them to make it better, but he didn't teach notes or pitch. And tomorrow I will read some stuff from Teaching from the Balance Point, which touches on that and which I think supports my desire to get kids a bit more self-starter. It's why in the videos I'm making, I'm not breaking pieces down into tiny spoon-fed portions, but I'd like to encourage successive approximation from seeing my fingers and seeing my bow and hearing the notes and a bit of singing along the way. I think it's important to look at notes on the stave. I think we don't do much of that in school, and so we have to work a little harder on our note reading skills independently. But again, if we put that in the environment, the stave is not alien or scary, and it's natural and normal to see the notes progressing up the stave and hear the pitch go up and understand the correlation between the physical location of those dots and the notes that children are hearing. Rhythm's a whole different kettle of fish that's going to come later. We'll talk about that later. So if you want to chase this down, you can download it and read it on your Kindle. As I said, it's a little bit esoteric, and I treat it a little bit like reading poetry, where I dip in and I read That's usually about a page, maybe 2 pages at a time, and then try and pull it apart in my head and think about what it means and what Suzuki thought I needed to know. So I hope that's helpful. I am endeavour to model my enthusiasm for working on small chunks. If you saw the video I posted of Audrey and piano, you will understand why that is so necessary right now. Stay well and sweet dreams.